Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to this high-level roundtable discussion. We are now going to be hearing from the European Commission, from 3 key member states in Brussels, and also from the private sector. So let me introduce our panelists and bring them up onto the screen one by one. Thibaut Kleiner, Director for Policy Strategy and Outreach at DG Connect at the European Commission, who tells me he's making one of his first appearances in his new, very important position. Welcome, Thibaut. Mina Kimura, who's the Deputy Permanent Representative of Finland to the European Union. Welcome, Mina. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ricardo Castanera, Digital Councillor, Coordinator, Permanent Representation of Portugal to the EU, who I think this morning will have to wear 2 hats if his head is big enough, as both Portugal and the upcoming Portugal to the European Union. Michele Geraci, former Undersecretary of State for the Italian Ministry of Economic Development. Michele. Andrew Williamson, Vice President, Global Government Affairs and Economic Advisor at Huawei Technologies. And finally, Michael Opitz, who's the partner, Head of the Time Practice Central Europe at Arthur D. Little. Each speaker will have up to 10 minutes. Michael will respond at the very end. And then I will remind you all in the audience, if you want to ask questions of the audience, which I tell the panel, which I strongly recommend, you use the chat function on the right-hand side, and we will do our best to accommodate as many of your questions as possible. Enough from me. It gives me great pleasure to give the floor to Thibaut. Over to you, Thibaut.
Many thanks, Paul, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. Indeed, it's a very busy period for the European Commission, for the European Union at the moment. We are looking forward for some deals on the budget, on Brexit and so on. But today, I would like to focus on something that the President von der Leyen has put at the forefront of our activities, and it is the digital transformation. Next slide, please. Today, I would like to focus essentially on some of the programs we are putting forward to really accelerate this digital transformation, because we are in the middle, as we all know, of a crisis. I mean, the COVID-19 crisis is also an economic crisis, but it is all showing as well how important digital technologies are for all of us. I mean, just this event, online, I don't think we would have expected, last year to be spending so much time in virtual workshops and conferences. The positive thing is that this means that we continue being active and we can devote time to the same interactions as in the past, but we are doing it digitally. And I think that everybody now has realized how important digital technologies are, not only for certain sectors, but for everyone and for the whole society and the whole economy. And this means that the digital transformation has become today even more important. And that's why if you look at the recovery plan that the Commission has put forward, it's a sizable amount of money, but at the same time, it has also a flavor where we want to use somehow the recovery as an opportunity to transform our societies. It's a unique opportunity, in fact, to make the best out of these investments, and not like, if I may say so, in 2008, 2010, where in some member states, even though there was a lot of public support, this public support did not always increase the efficiency of the economy. I think that we need to learn from that, and this time make sure that when we invest at the right place, at the right time, and especially that we use this investment to transform our economies and societies. So indeed, I just wanted to show here the numbers we are talking about. And again, we hope very much that Hungary and Poland will somehow come to an agreement with the rest of the EU members, and we can have this budget unleashed as soon as possible. But it is the biggest opportunity ever in terms of the EU funding. And a large proportion of this should actually go into digital investments. Next slide, please. And indeed, that's where the support is focused. At the moment, we have new programs that we are introducing. The first one is Digital Europe program. It's a brand new program that tackles really a gap between the research and the market. So it's about really deployment of digital capacities at scale. And we're talking here about high performance computing, artificial intelligence, data and cloud, cybersecurity, but also skills and high impact deployment in areas from health to the Green Deal and transport and public sector, if you want. So a brand new program, more than 7 billion euro investment. We have also Horizon Europe, I mean, a very well-established research and innovation program that will also dedicate a sizable proportion of its activities to the digital transformation, strengthening our leadership in a number of areas, from, again, artificial intelligence to application in robotics, in a lot of forward-looking technologies like quantum and so on. And then we have an upgraded Connecting Europe facility for digital, 2 billion for really networks in the future, as well as strategic backbone capacity from, again, cloud and HPC. But that's not all. We also have actually across the MFF a series of opportunities for investments. In the European Regional Development Fund, there is really a boost for digital across the board so that regions also transform their economy and society and digitize as much as possible what they need. So altogether, we are talking here about really almost 20% of this as expected investments. Is a very significant amount of opportunity for investment. InvestEU has also a strong component on digital. Again, the idea here is to provide loans and equity investment in a number of areas, from AI to networks, again, and we expect that there will be a very good leverage from these financial instruments, thanks to the EIB and the EIF. And last but not least, I would like to mention really the opportunity from the Recovery and Resilience Facility. I mean, this is once in a lifetime, I would say. And I would really encourage member states who are listening to really pay attention to the opportunity they have and not to waste this investment. 20% of the target means 134 billion in the next 3 years. This is very significant, and this should really go to the right place, not simply to buy token, I would say, tablets here and there. I think that the opportunity is really to invest in the future. For instance, a combination of, we have calculated, of network, high performance computing, artificial intelligence and data. All this you can afford 300 euro per person, and this would make a huge difference for the competitiveness of our member states. So you see, I mean, it's really, and I would like to underline this, an effort from the EU to boost this transformation thanks to joint investment, thanks to new programs in the digital area. Next slide, please. And I would just want here to give you an example, a graphic example in one area that I believe interests also the audience, and this is the 5G networks. I mean, 5G is really at the heart of the digitization of our economy and society. Huge opportunities there to make sure that any object that can be connected to a network is connected to a network. This opens really the possibility for new services. One of them has to do with connected mobility, and our aim and ambition, as expressed in the 5G action plan, is that every major road, every major railway is really connected to 5G. You see around the map of Europe, it could be quite different and quite exciting, really, if we manage to get these 5G investments across the board, thanks notably to this investment package. Next slide, please. And just to conclude, I mean, I would like to mention that in relation to all these possibilities, all this opportunity for transformation, the Commission is also preparing not only a series of legislative initiatives, but next year we will have also a vision on the digital decade. So the next 10 years, what we expect Europe will manage to deliver and how we will transform ourselves for the better and for the benefit of our citizens. I will stop there, Paul. This was just a flavor for the intensity of how we want to transform Europe in terms of digital. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Thibault, for that. I should point out to the audience that we will make available, with Thibault's permission, the slides he just presented to us. So no need to scribble down lots of notes. And any slides, presentations in this panel will be made available to everybody watching this discussion this morning. I have many questions for you, Thibault, but I'd rather let everybody in the panel have their chance to speak first in case we run out of time. But I do promise, this is a threat as much as a promise, I will be back at the end of the final speaker to ask you some questions. I now turn to Mina Kivimaki. Mina, over to you. You've just finished a pretty exhausting but also very successful presidency, so I look forward to your comments. Over to you, Mina.
Thank you very much. Very good morning, and thank you very much, first of all, to Forum Europe for hosting this very timely discussion, and of course, very warm thanks for inviting me to speak here. Yes, indeed, we just kind of survived the presidency, and then, of course, this year has been quite extraordinary for all of us. So it's been really hectic still, but I think it's clear that this pandemic has highlighted, if we needed any further convincing, that we must accelerate the digital transition, not just on policy level, but also with concrete actions. And it is clear, of course, that digitalization promotes resilience in crisis, but also in a broader future-looking perspective, it plays an important role in the green transition. And in Finland, we think that digital transition is the EU's main enabler of sustainable growth and competitiveness, and as well as industrial renewal. And we believe that in the EU we should work together towards meeting ambitious digital goals, and we must foster innovation and strengthen the competitiveness of the single market, with the focus on connectivity, data, economy, skills, as well as stronger digital capabilities of the SMEs. And why do we think these are the priorities? First of all, high-performance connectivity is an important element for promoting European strategic value chains, technological competitiveness, and industrial ecosystems. Together with automation and artificial intelligence, it will promote a transition towards new practical applications, services, and solutions. And there is a clear need for us to work together at the EU level to identify policy measures to enhance the capabilities and competitive position of Europe. This is the case particularly in the areas of microelectronics, the industrial Internet of Things, industrial data platforms, as well as cloud software. And I would also say that promoting connectivity has been one part of Finland's success in building digital society, in particular progressive telecommunication policies. Finland, I'm happy to say, is a front runner in mobile connections, and our goal is to ensure that we remain at the forefront of this development in the future as well. And the aim is that by 2025, all households in Finland should have access to at least 100 megabit per second connections. We are also known as one of the leading countries of the world in the introduction of 5G, and we have already auctioned 3 5G bands, and commercial 5G networks can already be found in 70 Finnish cities. And despite the pandemic, we have seen the importance to continue allocating more spectrum for 5G. Secondly, I mentioned data. That was something that we focused very strongly also during our presidency last year, and we really feel that data is at the heart of the ongoing digital revolution and an essential resource to enhance our citizens' well-being, fostering long-term competitiveness and climate sustainability, and also a fundamental element in the recovery from the COVID crisis. And the EU has taken a leading role in developing the rule-based, trustworthy data economy, and we feel it very great to see that data is being prioritized also now by the Commission, and we welcome the recent proposal for the Data Governance Act, the first concrete legislative action to implement the EU data strategy. And it is important to make it easier to share and use data across borders and between different sectors of the society. And we from Finland, we continue to promote ethically, economically, and socially sustainable European data policies. And we also think that the aim should be to harness digitalization really to support also the objective of making Europe climate neutral by 2050. Then lastly, it is essential to strengthen the digital skills of EU citizens, businesses, and public administrations. Investments in skills can give a boost to the digital leadership of Europe, respond to the challenges posed by the transformation of work, and provide for greater equality between people. It's very important that we make sure that the digital transition will equally benefit everyone, and therefore we need to strengthen skills extensively throughout society, while of course also supporting the training of specialist professionals. For example, at the end of our presidency last year, we wanted to provide European citizens with free access to an online course on artificial intelligence called Elements of AI, and more than 530,000 people have already taken the course globally, from which 40% are women. And this autumn, a sequel to the Elements of AI has been launched that looks into the actual algorithms behind AI. Thibault, in his remarks, talked about the investments that we need, and that's very essential. The importance of the public funding to trigger the private investments is really essential. But from our perspective, we think that we also need the enabling policy framework that I outlined just now. And when we are considering in Finland the national recovery plans, we set up a working group to examine how to transform the steps that we have now taken during the crisis into a permanent digital leap. And the group made a contribution to our national recovery investment instruments on this. And the plans in the area of digital focus on improving digital connectivity, building digital competencies and practices in the economic and financial sector, strengthening digital skills, investments to R&D, and increasing cybersecurity competencies. And one important element is really improving infrastructure for data use and digitalization, public sector services, and this includes structures for industry and public services to reuse data, and solutions will be created to manage the right of businesses and individuals to use their own data and to share that data. And our aim is really to create conditions for sustainable infrastructure and digital transformation in society in a manner that strengthens productivity, capabilities, and trust. So this is something I wanted to share with you in the beginning of this session, some highlights of how we have seen developing our digital policies in Finland, and what we think EU should focus in the future. And we clearly need to continue working together to meet our ambitious shared goals. And we also must be very brave and look curiously into new, better ways of doing things. And we think that only in this way we can grab all the opportunities that we have in front of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mina. We'll be talking about by being brave and finding new ways to do things when we come to the end of our discussion in a moment. Let me now turn to Ricardo Castanera. Ricardo, thank you for being with us. You are very much in demand at the moment, I know that. In 3 weeks' time, you're starting to run Europe, so it's a big job you have. So we look forward to hearing from you. Ricardo, over to you.
Good morning, Paul. Thank you very much for having me here. It's always a great pleasure, especially to have the chance with Mina, with Thibault, and Michele and Andrew. I would start with giving you, I would say, some of the big priorities for the incoming Portuguese presidency. And of course, the digital will be one of the 5 big priorities. And the digital itself follows, I would say, 3 guiding principles. Firstly, we have the conviction that digital transition is a strong driver of a sustainable economic recovery. Together with the green transition, this is a unique opportunity to strengthen the single market. Secondly, we must enhance the digital empowerment of citizens, but also businesses, supported by a trustworthy, ethical, and neutral digital environment. And thirdly, we want to uphold digital democracy, which must be reinforced to ensure Europe's role as a global reference. Taking a closer look to the digital initiatives, and we're going to have a lot on our plate, as you know, on the legislative side. We think that in order to foster the competitiveness and the attractiveness of the digital single market, but also to promote a level playing field for all businesses, especially the small ones, the SMEs, the startups, the presidency, the incoming presidency, will give top priority to the digital services package, the DSA and the DMA. And we also aim to contribute to the free flow of data, enhancing the access and sharing of data in the single market. To promote the digitalization also of the public administration and the public services. And we want to advance in that order with the Data Governance Act discussion, also the framework for AI, which expect to come up by March, but also the European digital identity, which is a very, very important proposal. It means that we fully support the European drive towards becoming a global leader in the digital domain. How are we going to do that? We are preparing, and we will put forward 3 declarations that seek to reinforce the 3 priority areas. The first one on infrastructure and international connectivity. Thibault on its presentation somehow mentioned it. The second, European digital model based on rights and values. And the third one on entrepreneurship and startups. Let me talk a little bit more about the first one, on infrastructure and international connectivity. This will be one of our priorities. It's a plan to bring our continents closer together. We will call it European Data Gateway Platform Strategy. European Data Gateway Platform Strategy. Portugal and a growing number of member states, we agree that there is a missing pillar in the European digital strategy. There is a distinct lack of reference to the creation of links between Europe and other parts of the world. And with that declaration, we aim to address some challenges. First, taking a stand in an expanding market. Currently, just 4 market players alone account for 95% of the world market of data storage and processing services. We need to enhance international connectivity as a precondition for the European and European-based companies to become more competitive. Then, to increase European connectivity with the rest of the world. Submarine cables, for example, not only feed digital data hubs, but they also provide wide benefits to local sectors, including jobs, innovative and high-value products and services. Then strengthening the EU global influence. Global submarine cables infrastructures, for example, have so far been heavily concentrated in the Northern Hemisphere. And to attain European digital leadership, it will be decisive to ensure that new, secure and resilient submarine cable routes will link the EU and the countries in the southern hemisphere. In this perspective, during the Portuguese presidency, we will inaugurate the new Ela Link cable, which will connect Europe through the south of Lisbon to Latin America, the northeast of Brazil, the city of Fortaleza. But we think that there are some international cable gateways that can be clustered into 3 platforms. The EU Atlantic Data Gateway Platform that I've explained, but also the EU Mediterranean Data Gateway Platform and the EU North Sea Data Gateway Platform, probably closer to Mina's heart. Said that, it means that those are very important initiatives that on the international connectivity we will develop. So, on the second area is an European digital model based on digital rights. What does it mean? It means that we will, during a very important event in Lisbon, present a declaration on digital democracy with a proposal. This declaration will lay the foundation for a European model of digital transformation. in order to enhance and strengthen the human dimension of the digital ecosystem, which is something important, is to reinforce digital literacy, democratic values, citizens' rights. And we want to invite a broad range of stakeholders, including member states, non-EU countries, and also private sector to sign that Lisbon Declaration. And the last dimension and the last declaration is about entrepreneurship and startups. We believe, and we like to say that ourselves in Portugal, we are already a startup nation. We think that we need to leverage that message and make Europe a startup bloc, startup region. And we see that Europe, we are lagging behind in terms of the capacity to retain investment or startups in Europe. And then once they reach a certain level, they typically move to other continents. We must revert the drainage of resources. And for that reason, we will present also a declaration on the Startup Nation Standard, which seeks to harmonize and mature the startup European ecosystem. That's it. We have in front of us, Paul.
That's extraordinary. You managed to condense all that, Ricardo, in about 6 minutes. It's quite an achievement. A lot to think about there. You have a very packed 6 months ahead of you, that's for sure. And it seems very, very exciting and very, very innovative. We'll come back to some of your points when I prefer for the last panelist. Thank you very much. I now turn to Michele Geraci to get the Italian side of the discussion, and great pleasure in handing over to you, Michele.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'll try to give you a view from, as you said, from the Italian side, and if I may, from what I have gathered during my political experience in the Italian government last year. Things get done only when there is a alignment of interest from both the economic and the political sectors in each country. And in the case of digital, this is no exception. On that, with that premise, I'm quite optimistic about the development and the potential of digital in Europe. A little bit like 40 years ago when Deng Xiaoping, Margaret Thatcher, and Ronald Reagan moved away from state to market-driven economies. And I make, of course, a simplification of the process at the same time in 3 different parts of the world. Today, I think we have the same situation with Xi Jinping moving on green and digital. We have the European Commission moving on green and digital, and likely the United States will at least rejoin the green multilateral table. And they need to understand a little bit more about the benefits of technology in the sense of cooperation, because, of course, that's also an issue that raises some eyebrows around the world. Why? Because when things go well, we all are happy to do business together. When things don't go well, like now, for this year, for the next year, and for a long period of time, of course, countries, organizations, government do have a natural tendency to close into themselves and try to raise barriers to cooperation, because they fear that we live in a zero-sum game world, and so other people's victories or wins are our own losses. And this is a little bit a tendency that we need to try to avoid, because it is not constructive. But it is a situation that we need to face. There is no gain in pretending that this does not exist. There is no gain in pretending that it's very good that the European Union is taking steps, and I'm very happy to hear what I heard today. I'm very happy about all the plans that we have in place. It is also very true that, and I speak to you from Shanghai, which is the only economy where in March of last year, almost put the virus and the economic crisis to bed. And 9 months later, the country is growing, while we in Europe, and I personally fear for my country in Italy, we are facing a minus 10% drop in GDP. We talk too much. We do not do enough. All the nice things that I would love to have them on the table in March last year, they will not come for another year. Recovery fund. We are too focused, and this is really a true invitation I do say to our Portuguese friends. We're focusing too much on the sources of funds and not on the uses of funds. I used to work in Wall Street. The money always follows good projects. There is never lack of money, especially in a zero interest rate environment. There is hunger for profit. Venture capital investors are looking for opportunities. We cannot spend in Europe 18 months discussing how we finance certain plans, and we really do not make plans on how to use those funds. And again, I blame myself and my country first, that we need to do more on the asset side of the balance sheet, not on the liability side. And so it is important to know that the money is there, but the money is always there. Banks are there. This time the European Union is acting as a dealer, trade dealer in between the market, raising funds and reverting the funds to lending to member states, better conditions. This is not make it or break it. Bill Gates never looked at cost of interest when he decided to start Microsoft. He looked at the left-hand side of his balance sheet, the asset and the quality of the project. So this is my real invitation. We need to look at what we're going to do with the money. And this is something that individual countries need to do by themselves, because the European Union can give and open up and facilitate the process, and that's an excellent activity, but it is down to individual member states to decide what they will do in terms of technology, what they decide in terms of infrastructure development, and this has always been the case. So my real warning to all of you is do not fall into the trap to believe that the solution is a multilateral cooperation, because, as I said at the beginning, countries do look at individuals' interest. We live in democracies. They need to have the consensus of people who are not patient to wait for 20 years plan, which other countries have the luxury of doing. So we need to deliver. We cannot talk anymore. And I really say that because I'm in China, where I see very little debate and a lot of activities. And that's why we already have a 5G in China. It's been going on for more than a year, while we are still debating if high frequency does bring or not health issues. I'll tell you, we also need to cooperate at individual levels, at country level, also with other parts of the world. We need to rejoin our American friends. We need to look at Asia with an open heart, because it is from there that the technology innovation is coming, from China, from Korea, and also from other parts of the world. So it is very important to have meetings like this and discussion like this, and I'm very happy that we can discuss this. And I do believe that I have to be honest, we will suffer economic and social crisis for the foreseeable future in Europe. We are not the leading power in the world. We are 5% of the world population. Our GDP will relatively go down and down, so lower and lower proportion. We talk about globalization being in crisis, and it is true if we think that the world ends at the border of Europe, because the globalization will hurt Europe, but will not hurt the globe. So let's look at a less Eurocentric view. Let's look at a more national state view and really look at globalization for what the world is, the globe. Because we, Europe, may be the relative losers, but other parts of the world may be the relative winners. And let's therefore avoid the trap of ourselves to fall into the protectionist, let's say populist, I can say that because I was part of this government, view that we do not want to help other parts of the world to develop. GDP, and I stop here, really grows for four main things: growth in number of people, and we have no input on that. Growth of land, and we cannot do wars with other countries. Growth of capital, and we really don't have any, and we cannot use more capital. And so the only really input left is what we call it factor productivity, innovation, technology. And for my country, for a country like Italy, really the first three variables are really difficult to be used to give input to GDP. So the only one weapon that we have left is the innovation. But people don't understand it. People fear technology. People are afraid of privacy for wrong reasons, because they don't understand that they have already lost the privacy. So there is a very heated debate about technology. We have problems in Italy to even move from cash to the use of credit cards because of the fear of privacy, which is nothing to do with national security in most cases. It is the fear that people don't want to tell other people that they had a coffee with someone else. It is not about a major strategic issue. So this is the work that we need to do to inform the people, to tell the technology in itself is neither good or bad, but it needs to be analyzed, learned, and then the application can be good or bad. But at the moment, the general public is really, for the wrong reasons, very cautious on the use of technology because everything is politicized. Even the use of masks is right-wing or left-wing, and this is not the way to do business. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michele. That was very provocative, actually, many of your comments. So we'll come back to them, I'm sure, in the panel discussion towards the end. Thank you. I now turn to Andrew Williamson. Andrew, over to you.
Hello. Well, thank you very much, Paul, and good morning to everybody. So I've got some slides. I'm going to follow up actually on a lot of the points that that Michele just made, and also Ricardo and the other speakers. But if we could just go through to the first slide, I'm going to take it to really a kind of a macroeconomic level, because I want to focus on the recovery. You know, this is really important to all countries, and I think we've become familiar now with this veritable alphabet soup of different shaped recoveries. But what I think is really different this time round, for those of us that are old enough to remember previous recessions and the great financial crisis, is that there's a much broader consensus now amongst economists about the role for government. It's really important what government's already done, but we've got to start thinking about that medium to longer term recovery. So you've got really eminent economists like Paul Krugman talking about the US situation, by extension other advanced economies talking about, you know, the need to really invest. We shouldn't be too worried at the moment about fiscal deficits. We know in the West, by and large, you know, lots of our infrastructure is old, it's decaying. And there is a, you know, there is an economic argument about, as long as we can get growth above real interest rates, then this is a real opportunity. There's an opportunity here for fiscal stimulus. And Larry Summers talks about, you know, the real threat of secular stagnation, that unless government acts as that kind of backstop consumer of last resort, then aggregate demand in the economy won't be sufficient really to kind of ignore
I think we may have lost the signal briefly.
I think we have, Paul. What we can maybe do is just see if we can get Andrew back. Otherwise, we can maybe hang on. I think Andrew might be back. No, we've lost him. Maybe, I know that we have Michael lined up to make a few comments following to respond to kind of the speaker. So maybe if we pass to Michael, okay, and we will try and get Andrew back following that. So we'll try and work on that now.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have a temporary glitch. Oh, you're back with us, Andrew?
I hope so. I was just getting started.
Perfect. Yes. Well, don't worry. We were listening to you, then we lost you. But please carry on.
Okay. Good. We're back. Talking about, you know, the need for. So next slide. Next slide. Whilst I've got the connection. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about, so it's not just those economists, it's the OECD, the IMF, they've brought out lots of research, very supportive as well as of this idea of a government role, but we don't want to waste taxpayers' money. IMF came out with in-depth research earlier this year, talking about the best way that government can really spend that money to boost the economic recovery and support it. And by and large, they showed, proven through their research, that the highest fiscal multipliers, as they're called, best return on investment, will come through investment in infrastructure, essentially. Multiple studies as well, including from the European Commission, also show those multipliers are even higher than one for new digital infrastructure, in particular 5G, but also fiber broadband. So, there's lots of compelling econometric research that suggests this is the best way that government could invest their money. Take the opportunity, think about investment in infrastructure, but think about investment into the infrastructure of the future, new infrastructure. Next slide, please. And look, there's also been multiple economic research studies that are trying to look at the economic contribution that mobile broadband has made to countries around the world and fixed broadband. I think the best research has been from the ITU in recent years, over 130 countries included in their study, and they have compelling evidence that mobile broadband and fixed broadband has contributed significantly to overall economic growth rates across countries. But even more recent research focusing on the digital ecosystem suggests that this is even more important. So it's not just enough to have the infrastructure as a foundation for countries, but it's also about nurturing your domestic, your international digital ecosystem on that. That's where the real boost to growth will come in the future. Next slide, please. And research we've conducted ourselves at Huawei kind of, suggests, tentative evidence for this as well. It's not just about the economic growth, it's about building resilience. And I took here some IMF forecasts from last year and latest round of forecasts and just measured that against Huawei's measure of global connectivity. And you can see there, there is a reasonable correlation that suggests the bounce back for countries in terms of economic growth in 2021 is correlated. Hard to prove the causal relationship, but is at least correlated to the sophistication, if you like, of their digital economy to date. Next slide, please. So look, I don't think this is unknown to many governments, and I wanted to go beyond the EU and just talk quickly about what other countries are doing. I'm here in China. I can talk about China. I think Michele was talking about this. I mean, the Chinese plan for this kind of digital economic recovery is really highly ambitious. I mean, we are talking multiple hundreds of billions that have been earmarked into 5G infrastructure, into industrial internet. This plan is still underway, but these numbers have come through. I think some really interesting examples as well that could be utilized in Europe. There's this talk about the cost now in the major cities, municipal areas in China like Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Shanghai, Beijing. It's too expensive to build big data centers that are needed for the future. So there's lots of money that's being posted to less developed regions in China, trying to expand and build a digital ecosystem there for kind of mega data centers that can be then utilized by China's digital ecosystem in the more kind of populous and urbanized centers of the country. Next slide, please. In Malaysia as well, it's not just the advanced economies that are doing this. Malaysia has put forward lots of big plans already, and it's all about this kind of, let's not just build the digital infrastructure, but let's nurture our digital ecosystem. So they have established an investment fund, but also looking for international investors to come in. They're easing the process, but it's all about, kind of allowing and specifically improving digital transformation a lot for SMEs in the country. But also, as I said, they have already put through plans for promoting innovation in enterprises and technological incubation, trying to build and make thrive that national digital ecosystem as well. Next slide, please. In New Zealand, there's lots of evidence. This is recent research from Open Signal, just talking about, the really impactful and profound improvements in just download speeds, which we know have been really vital during the pandemic and will be over the next few years. But New Zealand had been looking at, auctioning its 5G spectrum earlier in the year, but the government made a big decision that the importance of 5G was so fundamental to the likely economic recovery for New Zealand that it was going to drastically reduce the kind of auction process, and actually just decided to put a fixed, much lower price on blocks of 10 megahertz for 5G bandwidth out to the telco operators and others. Next slide, please. So look, in summary, there's lots of research that we've done also with ADL, in partnership with ADL, looking at this. But, we essentially see that there are 5 broad policy goal areas, and there are some great examples around the world of where to learn from that. Fundamentally, we've got to drive digital infrastructure investment, but we've also got to be mindful about also developing digital capabilities. Korea's Digital New Deal has lots of ideas and funds that are being specifically targeted to do that. Also promote digital enablement through industry, so exploring different ways of utilizing 5G connectivity, Wi-Fi 6 for the Internet of Things, for smart manufacturing, catalyzing new technology research. Germany has, in their latest budget process, has also targeted, earmarked lots of funds to areas such as AI, quantum computing, and then finally, I highlighted the Malaysia plan there, but it's the real importance as well in terms of what you can do to develop your digital ecosystem. So that's a very quick look around the world at what other countries are doing to boost a digital economic recovery.
Stayed within your 10 minutes, which is also quite an achievement. And just to remind the audience, your slides will be made available at the end. Right. Our final panelist is Michael Lopez. Just to remind the audience, Michael does not have prepared remarks per se, but he will be maybe responding, Michael, when you come on screen, to what you've heard from the other panelists so far, and then we'll move on to the discussion with the whole panel. So over to you, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and good morning to everybody, and thanks for inviting me here. Yes, let me build upon what the previous speakers have said with regards to both the infrastructure required for digitalization as well as the ecosystem, as Andrew just pointed out, and link that back to the archetypes which Kurt presented in the morning. And as you know, Germany as well as France and Luxembourg are characterized as the efficient prosumer archetype, which means that they are fostering the digitalization of very important industry sectors for their respective nation. And as Kurt pointed out, there's a wide range of policies being considered regarding technology, capabilities, ecosystem, and industry. And let me just point on two aspects. First, the ecosystem. As Andrew mentioned, so the so-called Platform 4.0 brought to life already years ago in Germany from the Ministry for Economic Affairs. And this is about the digital transformation of manufacturing, which is, of course, one of the key industries here in Germany. So this is a really targeted aid for those the ecosystem. They develop visions for the Industry 4.0 in 2030. They formulate strategies, they foster international cooperation, and they provide special learning and testing and training facilities for SMEs. So I think that's a good example for that. And the second remark was on the infrastructure, the underlying connectivity infrastructure, being it mobile or fixed. And also Germany, I think, did a very big step in that respect by granting 100 megahertz of 3.7 gigahertz spectrum to enterprises. So not to the telcos, but basically for free to enterprises so that they can take the digitalization of their manufacturing plants in their own hands. Yeah? Very much debated, as you can imagine, here in Germany. But I think that was a step exactly to support the digitalization of Industry 4.0. And Paul, if I may make another remark to the previous discussion, yes, connectivity is the underlying backbone for digitalization. But I always sense when we talk about connectivity that it's kind of reduced to 5G, especially in the mobile area. I think we rather have to discuss the requirements which we need to fulfill. Let me give you an example. When we talk about the better connectivity alongside tracks, railway tracks, especially in rural areas, then 5G is probably not the best solution. We rather have to discuss which kind of bandwidth do we expect there and how do we measure that bandwidth. Is it measured at the core of the mobile cell or rather at the edge of the mobile cell? And the latter one brings the, let's say, consistent customer experience, but that has a huge impact on the densification of the mobile network and hence on the cost. So let's rather discuss the requirements and not the technology solution in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. We're now going to attempt a panel-wide discussion. There are a number of questions coming in from the audience, which is always a good sign that people have been paying attention and have felt provoked to react. But before I turn to the question from the audience, I would like to ask maybe the same question to all of you, but starting with Thibault. And it is this question of money. I know Michele said en passant, the money is always there, but this is different. The funds we're talking about, Next Generation Europe and the multi-annual financial framework, the funds involved, as you said, are enormous. And I think you said without misquoting you that it's important that the states spend this money wisely, but also strategically. And I think you were maybe echoing some concerns on the EU side that this might not be the case. But it does bring the question, having said that, what kind of influence has the European Commission in this case over how member states were to spend the funds being dispensed with? They are reallocated, these funds, we all know. Let's assume there's an agreement at the summit tomorrow. Member states have their relative allocations, and then they have, presumably up to a point, their own prerogative for how they actually go off and spend these funds in the digital world. And I'll be asking the same question to everybody else in the panel. But let's start from the European Commission perspective, first of all. Thibault.
Many thanks, Paul. And indeed, it's a very pertinent question. In fact, it was at the heart of the difficult debates between member states back in July when the recovery plan was designed. And there was, I think, some healthy skepticism among some member states about the ability of some of their fellow leaders to make the best of any funding coming from the EU. So I think it's very healthy that we have this debate. And I was pleased that somehow Michele was saying that we need to innovate, because that's exactly the point. At the same time, I can tell you that we are trying from the EU to put in place the conditions for making the best of these investments. I'm just telling you now, really between us almost, that we are receiving the first national plans for recovery, and this is really a considerable amount. I mean, Italy is actually the biggest plan of all. So I mean, we will look very carefully at this one in particular, because it can make a big difference overall for the EU if it is well designed. And so far, I must say that we have not been so impressed with the specificities of some of the projects. But what we are doing is really a very detailed discussion with the member states. So we are there actually to ask them questions and to challenge them about really what they want to do. And we would like that instead of just doing a blank, tax breaks, for instance, they try to focus the investments where the leverage effect would be the highest, where we think that they will be part of a pan-European story in terms of deploying infrastructures. I think that Ricardo had a very compelling description of how the connectivity, including through cables and so on, can make a big difference across countries. And that's the kind of questions we are asking them. So it's really not only their prerogative, it's also EU taxpayers' money. And we try to make sure, not forcing them necessarily, but at least challenging them to make sure that what they decide to do makes sense and will also fit in a European design. Because at the end of the day, I think digital is scalable, and we need to differentiate this sector from others. If we do not join forces, we will just remain dwarf for many of these technologies. I mean, in cloud computing, in 5G, you need the scale. And only if you think European will you get the scale from day one. And I think that's what we are trying to bring to the table. Think about, where you are, try to make the best of these investments, but think in terms of a joint strategy.
Well, let me ask then. I say I want all the panel to intervene on this question if they so choose to do so, and turn to Mina maybe. That's a very good point Tim was making. At the same time, the underlying theme of today's workshop is one size does not fit all. There's an issue of sovereignty. Member states have different views about how their digital strategy should be developed and executed. So, how do you respond to that, Mina?
Thanks very much, and I think you saw me nodding at some time when people were speaking. So I think we agree very much that we really now need to make use of the public funds that we have, and the EU funds, and of course the national funds as well, in a most smartest way that we can. And we believe strongly on the leverage effect. So we think that we are talking about a lot now about the availability of public funds. But I don't think that any transformation, whether it's green or digital, will be done by public money. So what I was saying in I think in my introductory remarks was that in Finland, if we had kind of believed that the digital transformation would be kind of the only way to make that would be public money, I don't think we would be where we are now, because we simply didn't have the money. And so we had to believe in other kind of incentives also. So creating the enabling framework by legislation, by fiercely competitive market, by really making available the spectrums that is needed, and so on. So we need to have this enabling framework. And then when we talk about the money, we strongly also believe that we need to really make sure that we put the money where our targets are, and we really kind of achieve the renewal, not just in putting investments. And I think that is what Michele was saying, that it's not that you have huge amounts of money, but it's really important where you put it and where you target it. And when we are making the national plan now on digital especially, we are really trying to target the key bottlenecks there, and with the public money, so that then to leverage and really trigger also the private investment, and make sure that with the public money we do only the things that cannot be done otherwise. So I think that's very, very important.
Well, let me turn to Ricardo then, and I'll build on the question as I hear the responses from the different panelists. So building on that, Ricardo, you heard Thibault say also that that it's important that member states show us some kind of pan-European, cross-European, cross-EU strategic vision as well, not just in the national context. How realistic is that? On the one hand, member states can say, well, we have our own strategy, thank you very much, and you have to accept it as it is without interference by the Commission. At the same time, any member state, and let's take Portugal as an example, since you're from Portugal, has to demonstrate that you have a vision beyond your national borders. You're on mute, Ricardo.
Sorry, Paul. It makes absolutely sense, and I think that my previous words explained exactly our vision, which goes beyond the Portuguese brothers, with showing how international connectivity is absolutely a key factor, not just to enhance the Portuguese development, but also the European as a whole. But let me remind you that Portugal adopted a very ambitious digital action plan in early March 2019. The COVID pandemic naturally accelerated many of the goals of our national action plan, and this is something that we were already ready now to start executing the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. We will deploy a considerable part of the Recovery and Resilience Fund into the goals that were previously set by the Digital Action Plan. And we are really very proud that in our case, 31% of the European funds, not just the 20th, but 31% of the European funds will be focused on the digital domain, which of course is beyond the target set by the European Council. And in the Portuguese case, the digital transition pillar of the recovery plan consists of three domains: digital education, digital enterprises, and digital public administration. We are really confident that the planned initiatives will benefit everyone due to the ripple effect. One positive impact influence others. We think that we will lift a wide range of entities and companies to inspire, I would say, a systemic and really transformative digital reform. Of course, it's needless to say that we need the involvement of the industry, especially the small companies. It's absolutely crucial to get this done and successfully done. Last word, that a key priority in our Portuguese recovery plan is also the digitalization of the public sector. It's the third time that I've mentioned it, because it's really important. Our goal is, yesterday, a very important declaration, the Berlin's Declaration, has been signed, showing how also eGov is not just important for our daily lives, but also to enhance the digitalization of Europe and the various different sectors of our community. And our goal is also during I would say the next month is streamline automated processes among several public bodies, and then also, for example, facilitating the reuse of data. And public services must not act or not be perceived as isolated services, but rather as components of a very coherent ecosystem, in line with also the businesses and the citizens. That's our view. It's a quite holistic approach, but that's what has been set in our national plan, and now will be developed with European money according to the recovery plan.
Thank you, Ricardo. Michele, you said in your opening remarks that it's member states who decide how money is spent, but you've also heard from Thibault saying that your country, Italy, I think is the first country to submit some kind of strategic plan about how these EU funds will be spent. So there's clearly going to be, I hesitate to say negotiation, but certainly a dialogue, should we say, between the EU and member states, in this case Italy. Do you see any problems in that approach, or do you see any other alternatives?
We have to make a difference, and I think this is important because otherwise it creates distance between the institution in Brussels and the population. That we do not want this to happen. The recovery fund is a loan and the NA grant. The loan part is not different from any loans that any member state can access into the market. Yeah, there are better conditions, a bit of interest rate, there's a seniority issue. We get entangled into details. Basically, for the loan part, the part of the fund that the European Commission lends to member state is not different from what Goldman Sachs does every day. And this is what I used to do. So there is no additional thing that the population will perceive as a benefit. And so in a way, that's why I said emphatically, as you said, provocatively, it's acting like a trader dealer in the international market. Issue bonds, gets proceeds, and reallocates the proceeds and lending to other member states. And by pooling the risk, there is a little bit of saving, but this is not going to make it or break it. We in Italy, if you saw, my Minister of Finance, Mr. Gualtieri, has 2 days ago announced that they will stop the Minister of Finance issuing new bonds in Italy because we have a lot of money. We don't need any more money. So we have cancelled auctions in the bond markets. This is what he says, I believe is correct, because we have too much cash. And so that goes back to why I say we need to focus on what to do with the money. We don't need 209 billion or 290 now, because we in Italy, particularly, we never spent more than 15 in any 1 year. And you probably would agree that we have not always spent it in the best way. So excess of cash does reduce the average effectiveness of the investment. And people don't get it. We need to tell people we want to do an investment in digital economy that will save your lives now before the end of the year and will bring your job back into as it was by January 1st. This is what we need to sell people. We say we have the European Union coming to help, giving you money that will make your life better next week, not in July 2021.
Right.
Otherwise, let me be half politicians, half technical. People will take distances, will be reluctant to understand. And we do have solutions. We have technical solutions. We can look at Asia, the use of technology, the use of 5G to do tracing of contact. We can do technology to train people for the new jobs. Even I, that I'm normally a professor, I see my colleagues in university, they are not learning how to use StreamYard, Zoom to turn into online classes. This is what we need to use the money for. But it was,
Okay.
let me tell you something. I was in Wuhan last week. In Wuhan, there is the museum of the COVID. They've gone past the current affair issue. For Wuhan, the COVID is something that now lives inside the museum in the past. And we are now discussing what we're going to do in July next year. So
Right.
I want people to get that we are decoupling seriously between facts and promises.
Point taken, Michele. Thank you. We have something
You're welcome.
in. I wanted to make sure we have time. A quick question. I must turn to Andrew and or Michael. You may not think this is a discussion into which the private sector should intervene. It's a question of European institutions and national governments. Having said that, do you think there's a way for you to also insert your expertise into the dynamics of how these substantial funds should be spent at national level in the European Union to boost the digital economy? Andrew. And unmute, please, Andrew. Please unmute. We muted everybody because of some background noise, which is...
Sorry about that. Yes. So, yeah, difficult to, governments will know the best way to spend their money. We know there are many competing demands. I think from the private sector, though, what's important, and just to pick up on some of the points that Michele just made, is that the private sector needs a signal of intent, right? It needs to know government is committed to investing in a certain part of the economy, and I think that's a crucial difference. You're already seeing in lots of other countries around the world, there is no prevarication about this. They are betting on the future of the digital economy. I think Korea's digital New Deal is really kind of, the poster child for this kind of commitment from government. They've made it explicit. They want to move from being a follower nation in the global digital economy to becoming a pace setter. And they're committing large sums across lots of different areas to do that. And they're doing it now. That's the crucial difference. They've already started doing that. So I think, as a result of that, and what you see in China is that kind of, government support to building data centers, to supporting cloud computing, public cloud. It is already creating all these new business models. It's been quite astonishing to see this kind of creative destruction, if you like, in action in China. The use of VR to visit properties when social distancing is in place. The platform economy in terms of keeping small family restaurants open right through the lockdown. You are seeing, a real kind of a transformation digitally. And as I say, it happens because if the underlying environment is there, the nurturing environment for the digital economy is there, then all the entrepreneurs and all the businesses are flooding in. I think we all know there's a danger that if we continue this kind of support for the legacy economy, we run this risk of keeping these kind of zombie companies alive and jobs that may, need transformation or will change over time. So I think, really, that's where the private sector would be looking for governments to do the signal of intent and head in that direction.
Michael, any brief comment before I move on?
Yes, just three short points. The first, I like very much what Thibaut said, how he put it. Let's not rebuild the past, let's transform the society, and this is a big chance to do so. Second, whilst doing so, and this is referring to Ricardo, we need to make sure that we also invest into the basics, like digital governance, public administration, digital education, for instance, digital infrastructure that should not be left behind. And third, I think this is a very critical point. Europe is rich because of its diversity. And looking at Europe, we have very different archetypes, as we have learned in the beginning. And how do we make sure that we invest into the right things to transform or develop an archetype further? And I think that will be very difficult discussions between EU and member states, because we have to look at it from a European level on a, let's say, global competitive perspective, whilst the national perspective might be a different one.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Michael. It's true we've inevitably been focusing a lot on the European Union for obvious reasons this morning, although Andrew in his presentation did talk about other parts of the globe, and Ricardo talked about the vision for connecting other parts of the world as well under the Portuguese presidency. But this morning we heard Patrick talking about a digital divide within Ireland, and Ricardo's been talking about, in effect, a digital divide between other different regions of the European Union. We have a question from the audience from a gentleman called Venon Mutabi-Irwa, I'm sure I mispronounced that, sir, so forgive me, who's an academic, who's asked the following question, and you haven't all got to answer, but I'd be interested to see what you do, how you do want to respond to this gentleman's question. Technological transfer, he says, has been difficult for the developing countries and expensive. How is this problem to be dealt with as we move into the digital economy so that these countries do not fall behind? So the developing world, there's a big question there about their preparedness for this new digital world we're all starting to embrace. Anybody want to come in on that one? At least one of you, hopefully. Nobody wants to come in?
Well, I'll quickly comment, because clearly, we operate, the company operates in over 170 countries around the world. We're very proud of, what we've achieved in sub-Saharan Africa, in the Greater Africa region. I think one of the best ways that we've supported that is through our research and development, is finding cost-effective solutions. There's lots of information on our website. But, the solution that we provide now is that sometimes the private sector it cannot make the business case to invest in connectivity in underdeveloped rural parts of the world. So we have worked with lots of telecom operators in the world to try and find solutions. Our latest solution for this is really, it's called Rural Star 2.0. And it doesn't look particularly pretty, but it's a base station, it's an antennae system, and it drastically reduces the capital costs that are needed to roll out infrastructure and the operational maintenance costs by 50%. It's solar energy driven, that uses solar panels. And really, there are case studies we've done with GSMA that show just how connecting rural towns, rural villages in that part of the world has really profound transformative effects on security, on then healthcare, on education, and then you get this kind of virtuous upward cycle in terms of economic development.
Thank you, Andrew. I move then on to a question directly addressed to Thibault. I think I understand it's from a gentleman called Denis Ilnitsky. It's going to be a morning of mispronouncing names. Forgive me, Denis. From Kiev National Economics University. So to you, Thibault, thank you for your EU vision. The question is, how would you assess the share? I think it means the responsibilities of EU and national government efforts, kind of the relative role of each, the EU on one side and the member states on the other. Thibault.
Thanks, Paul. I think that's a pertinent question. We touched upon it a little bit in terms of the responsibilities between EU and member states. I would say that the starting point is, in our view, the country-specific recommendations that we make every year as part of this discussion in the European semester. So we look at really the strength and weaknesses of each and every national member state. We also use in that respect we have a set of indicators called the DESI indicators that looks in detail at various dimensions of the digital standing of all the member states, and we try to use that as a guiding mechanism to discuss and provide recommendations to member states. At the end of the day, I mean, I think also, as Mina was saying, it's also about the private sector and the economy and society as a whole to embrace the digital transformation. As governments, we only provide incentives and signals in terms of where the emphasis should be. But this is nevertheless helpful in times of crisis, because there I would disagree certainly with Michele that money is available across the board. It's not really the case when you have a lot of debt that you can still, do the same risk exercise than in the past. So that's also where I would say that we help making things possible, because we provide additional resources. So at the end of the day, I would say that this is all part of a puzzle. Each one should play its part, and not forgetting, of course, the private sector.
I have a question for the panel, if I could quickly find it again, on AI. I think I understand it. It came from YouTube, so we don't even know who posed it. What is the role of AI in preparing the policy solution that you'd accept as appropriate? I suppose it means the role of AI in future policy making. How comfortable are we with the growth of AI across the board? Who wants to respond to that? Ricardo, and unmute, please.
Yes, I think, okay, unmuted. Well, first of all, is what kind of AI we are talking about? This is the big question, because AI is a tool. It can be a tool for policymakers, but what kind of AI are we talking about? This is the big first question that we do have in front of us. And that's why we expect really, and we do have a lot of expectations on what will come up by March with the horizontal framework. Because, for example, the big question is, when we take a look on high risk applications on AI, for example, this is the big main question, because we cannot, one size fits all does not exist on AI. Some sectors present more risk than others. And especially we cannot, or not all uses within the same sector, including have the same high risk applications for fundamental rights too. It means that we need to find, and this is the first, I would say, task that we have in front of us, from a regulatory perspective, something that will avoid fragmentation of the single market. Because if we are not able to get a common ground on AI, it will have a very negative impact on the digital single market. It means that we must have a smart and very flexible regulation. It must be future-proof and business-friendly. But at the same time, the human-centric dimension is absolutely critical, and this is something that we must keep very close to our hearts when discussing AI. But just for the question, of course, AI is a tool, a very important tool, that we are already using, and during the pandemics on the health sector, we've been using a lot of AI solutions. We need to enhance that kind of use, but always with these, I would say, human control. And I think that's at least the European way of see AI, and it can make a big difference.
Thank you, Ricardo. Anybody else before I move on? No? In that case, a question from Per Olav Gustafsson, the Stockholm. He says that prerequisite for 5G is, of course, fiber connections. How do we make sure that the investments in fiber networks are sufficient to meet the future needs of 5G and open for all upcoming players on equal terms? That's a very important theme, I think, of this discussion as well. So who wants to respond to that? Equal access.
I can take it. Yes, I mean, clearly 5G requires fiber connection for the most part, indeed. And this is why, in fact, also we have put forward this 5G action plan a few years ago with clear targets in terms of what should be connected in the first place. And this is also where we see an advantage of connecting also major road and transport networks, because if you have cable there along these roads, I would agree with one of the participants. We said that 5G is maybe not, because of this range, serving all purposes, but if you have the cable on the ground around the roads, I mean, and the railways are very well designed, because they go through actually all the major cities in a way, from the way they were designed historically. If you have the cable there, I mean, it's quite easy then, to deploy the network in a positive manner. So I would say that it's exactly the purpose of this Connecting Europe Facility program we have at the EU level, and also of the discussion we have with member states for the recovery plan to deploy fiber, including actually undersea cables to connect with other regions.
And if I may add to that, the second Paul, we see new players coming to the market, as Thibaut just pointed out. I mean, the normal telcos provide the backbone, which is required here for connecting towers, for instance. So it's about the backbone network. We also see new players like the railway operators who provide the overcapacity alongside the tracks, or utilities who also have fiber assets. Yeah? And they come to the market and sell their overcapacity. So there will be, I think, sufficient capacity on the market.
Thank you, Michael. Ricardo, in your original intervention, you did use the phrase, we need a neutral digital environment. Do you think that's what is behind the question from Per Olav as well, that we need a neutral environment? And maybe you could amplify what you meant when you said a neutral digital environment.
When I say a neutral environment, for example, I'm talking about to enhance interoperability, for example. This is a key topic too when we talk about digital. If we take a look, the discussions that we've had for months on, for example, the COVID tracing apps, which we took too much time to get a common ground, and interoperability is absolutely critical to get the best results. This is just one very specific example on the neutrality of the digital ecosystem is absolutely key. But it also probably, and let me just say one word about the idea of having, or the question of having different kind of digital economy archetypes, or one digital single market champion specific archetype. I think that the digital single market, European digital single market, should not champion any specific one, I would say. Instead, the EU should strive to have a broad portfolio of archetypes, taking advantage of the rich diversity among member states. We think that if we achieve this, and together with the future-looking and enforceable regulation for the digital area, also with the proper investment in technologies, we will for sure not become only the digital, I would say, autonomous, but for sure a leader in the global tech race.
Thank you. And Mina?
Thank you. I just wanted to echo what Ricardo said. I think that's very important, that we really create robust market conditions, single market, and we don't have any kind of approaches that picks the winners in Europe. So I think that's really important, and I think that I come back to this, that the governments can in this these investments in fiber networks also very much do with concentrating on creating the kind of framework for enabling all these investments. So we have had a strategy for digital infrastructure now in Finland for a couple of years, and we really looked at what we can do on a commercial basis, and there we have all this, as I said, like for the 5G, we have already gone a long way there on a commercial basis. So creating the conditions for that, and then we are looking into the fiber, how we can promote that, for instance, simplifying all the administrative procedures and making sure that the investments are rolling in. So I think there's a lot that government can do on a very neutral basis, so that creating the conditions and the market
Thank you,
conditions.
We're running out of time, so I'm going to maybe try and wrap this up by asking all of you the same question, which is sufficiently broad that you can pick and choose which aspects of the question you like. But in any event, please keep your responses brief because we are running out of time. So the question is as follows to all of you, and we'll go to answer. We'll go in reverse order from the start of the panel discussion. How can the European institutions work alongside national governments and industry representatives to deliver a coordinated policy approach, whilst also taking into account these famous national differences we've been talking about all morning? Any clever ideas, starting with you, Michael?
Yes, I refer back to the portfolio logic of the archetypes, and as Kurt pointed out, there's a reasonable development path for every archetype. And I think if you can discuss around that topic, that logic, then you will find out which investments make sense and which investments wouldn't make sense on a national level.
Thank you. Andrew?
Yes, well, I will re-emphasize those points from ADL, in as much as, the Commission's role is to think through. We know that there have been many obstacles with the digital economy in Europe, that scale seems to be really important. There's been a big kind of driver of success in US internet giants and those in China as well. So their purvey, if you like, is to make sure that those obstacles are removed for a pan-European digital ecosystem. At the same time, the ADL research looks at, some countries have strengths in different areas, have different digital economy archetypes. So for national governments should really consider, the best way forward for them. What policy areas should they really be focusing on to kind of emphasize their national strengths and stick to those? I think, just kind of, broad brushed policy goals for all countries to foster a digital economy is probably the wrong approach. Be specialized and see what your contribution can be.
Thank you. Michele, briefly, sir.
I think the role of the European Union is to facilitate the cross-border activities, those that need to be coordinated, and I'm saying very simple, and leave to member states the implementation of the local strategies. And if I may, just a reply, I want to end on a positive note. The money is there, otherwise the Commission would not have it. They get it in the market. So it's positive. There is, with good ideas, money coming.
Thank you, Michele. Very brief. And Ricardo?
My answer is a bit different. I think that the debate is frequently focused on our weaknesses as a whole, as Europeans, and I think that we should also recall about our strengths and build on them. We have our big European industry, we have a thriving consumer market, and we are the largest trading bloc in the world. I think that working based on this kind of new, different, and positive mindset, and having national action plans, and having European Commission and the European institutions helping in order to harmonize the solutions, I think that it goes parallel and we can move together on that direction.
Thank you. Mina?
Thanks, very much agreeing with what Ricardo said, and I just have to say from our perspective that I think one of the most important roles for the European Commission and for the EU is really to creating the really robust and vibrant single market that is really an asset then for us to build our capabilities and our competitiveness.
Thank you, Mina. And the final word to you, Thibault.
I don't have too much to say. I think there were many wise words, but from my side, I think that we need to have somehow personalized targets for member states that together, bring a European vision. And then we need to make the best out of the programs that are on the ground. So the ones I was listing, so that we use this as a framework for action. I think we need really to do it now. It's not enough to speak about what we should be doing.
Talk. Well, we're due to finish at 11:30. It's exactly 11:30. So let me finish by thanking all of you on the panel for taking time this morning. We never take it for granted to Forum Europe that we know people are very busy, and so when you make the time for us, we are extremely grateful, all of you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the audience for listening. Thank you to those in the audience who posed questions. And I'll just remind you that recordings of these sessions will be made available, and links to them will be sent to you after the event, along with a link to access the After the Little report we've been talking about all morning as well. So again, my thanks to all of you. I hope you had a good discussion, found it interesting, and have a very good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.